Chapter 26. As we drove home that afternoon, I pulled my braids down over my eyes and thought about Kira's hands in my hair, the way they felt strong and warm and sure, the tiny point of her comb making straight parts between the braids, the smell of the lavender oil she rubbed into my scalp. I had sat there the way I did every time she did my hair, with my eyes closed and my head tilted down, secretly imagining Kira was my mother. I know that's stupid. Holly was sitting across from us, talking away and eating pretzels with peanut butter. I imagined my mom had put the bowl where it was between us. I imagined she'd said, "You always loved pretzels and peanut butter, Haley. I remember when you were a baby, you grabbed a spoonful of peanut butter out of my hand and shoved it in your mouth. I was so scared. All those stories I'd heard about peanut butter allergies and how babies shouldn't have it until they were older. I tried to pry your mouth open with my fingers and scoop it out." But it was Kira talking. Kira who had pried Holly's mouth open. Kira's fear. I let out a deep breath and felt my uncle glance over at me. "Tell me about her again," I said, "the little bit you know." "About your mom, right?" my uncle said. "I figured that's where you'd gone." I nodded. "I only knew her a short time," he said. "By the time Barry and your dad got real serious, I was already away at college. I hardly ever came home. You know our dad didn't approve, right?" "Yeah," I said, "but he died before I was born, and you and Dad used some of the money he left you to buy our house. Too bad, so sad for him, I guess." "Are you mocking me?" I shook my head. "No, just saying what you always say. Your dad wasn't a nice guy, but at least you got to know your mom, even though you were young when she died. I wish I had known mine." "You would have loved her like crazy, Hales," my uncle said, "and she would have been over the moon about you. She was over the moon about you." And how many times had he started the story this same way? I knew exactly what he'd say next, and in my head I said it with him. Your parents loved each other like that romantic movie kind of love, except it was real. They truly, truly loved each other. My mother and father had met when they were both at Brooklyn College. My mother was studying to be a nurse, and my father wanted to be a teacher. They had some kind of advanced science class together. My uncle was still in high school then. He said my dad told him he'd never imagined the two of them falling in love. He didn't even feel like a possibility. But then it happened, my uncle said. And your dad, when he told me about her, he just said, "She's the most amazing person I've ever met. You're going to love her." He didn't say she's the most amazing black person I'd ever met, so I was surprised when I first met her. "That's racist," I said. "No, it's just truth. I was a young knucklehead with a skinny brain, and then I wasn't anymore." "She changed you," I said. "She woke you up." "Both of you woke me up. And keep on making me up." He tapped my head. The sun was starting to set, and the sky was a bright orange now. Upstate was so different from Brooklyn. There weren't buildings blocking the sky, and the mountains felt like they were just there to let color slip through them and around them, just there to help us see it all. "Your mother would always try to pinch my cheek when I first met her," my uncle said. "You're such a cutie," she'd say every time she saw me. Man, I'd get so mad about it. I mean, it wasn't like I was some little kid like you. Hey, well, you know what I mean. I was 15. 15 is almost a man. Almost, Uncle, just almost, but not. She was only 5 years older than me. I'd always loved to see her smiling, and it was so easy to make her laugh. He glanced at me. "When you smile, it reminds me of her." I smiled into the window, trying to imagine my 20-year-old, not yet mother, pinching my uncle's cheek. I could see her hands, dark with the bright red polish, but her face and hair were blurred. "She was tall," I said. "Taller than your dad." "And someone in her family had red hair too," I said, "but not her." "Red hair on both sides," my uncle said. "You were doomed." I was doomed. My uncle laughed. Behind his glasses, I could see the lines at the edges of his eyes. Crow's feet. That's what he said people called them. Tiny maps of my life, he'd say. They were beautiful. We drove for a while without talking. We were listening to Joni Mitchell, a singer from way back before my uncle was a kid. She was singing about the color green. She had another song about the color blue, but the green song was one of my favorites. Her voice was sweet and high, but she could make it do crazy things and hold notes for so long, like it made your eyes water. My uncle sang along with her. "There'll be icicles and birthday clothes, and sometimes there'll be sorrow." The story is not complicated. Since that time in the hospital, I'd asked my uncle about it again and again. I was born when my parents were both 26. Then when I was 3, they got into a car accident coming back from a party. My dad was driving, and when they got a block away from my home, my dad accidentally hit the accelerator instead of the brake and mowed into a lamp post before swerving the car and hitting the outside wall of a donut shop. It was nearly morning and the streets were empty, so nobody came when he screamed for help. So he stumbled home to get my uncle to help him get my mom out of the car. She won't move. He kept saying, she won't wake up. My uncle's voice gets quiet when he tells that part of the story. My dad's nose was broken and he had cuts on his hands and arms. My uncle was babysitting me. Before the three of us could get back to the car, the cops pulled up beside us and arrested my dad for leaving the scene of a crime and for drunk driving. He kept saying to me, my uncle said, go get her, please go make her wake up. My mother was 6 days away from her 30th birthday. But by the time the cops booked my father, my mother had been dead for hours. She will always be 29. Sometimes I say the word slowly to myself, vehicular homicide. It sounds like a hiccup or like the first words of a song. It sounds like the promise of something, and then it doesn't. Tell me again about the day after the accident, I said. I told you your mom and dad both had to go away, my uncle said. I told you I'd keep you safe, though, that you didn't have to worry and that you'd see your daddy again soon. I told you I loved you and that I'd always take care of you. And I asked you who would take care of me all day, and you said, we're good, Red, I can do it. That I did. That's what you used to call me before I made you stop. Yep. And I said, does that mean I'm white now? My uncle said, you sure did. And I said, nope. You said I'd always be half white and half black. And that until it turned gray, you'd always have red hair. Tell me again how I made you stop calling me Red. You said, my name is Haley, not Red, and not quietly either. My uncle laughed. I'd never heard you have so much conviction before that day. I thought about Amari calling me Red and how I didn't mind it so much when he said it. And what did you think about how I said it? I thought, I'm raising a strong, brave girl. I'm doing something right. I leaned against the car and rested my head against his arm. Sometimes I don't feel so brave. Sometimes I just feel scared. I know, he said. That makes two of us. Chapter 27. You think he's coming back? Ashton asked. I don't know his phone number or anything. It was Thursday, and Esteban had been absent the whole week. The five of us sat in the corner of the cafeteria, not touching our food, while rain slammed against the windows. Miss Laverne said she's trying to find out what's happening. Holly said, but the number the school has for him is disconnected. Yeah, Amari said. Esteban doesn't have his own phone. Remember, I used to let him play games on mine? Amari stopped talking and shook his head. I mean, not I used to. He always plays games on mine. That's what I meant to say. And when he gets back to school, I'm going to keep letting him do it. But I started to say, no buts, Red. You have to think positive. I don't think he would move away without saying goodbye to us, Ashton said. We're his friends. But they take people, Tiago said, in the night. In the morning, they just take them. Like they took his dad. So what if they came in the night and took E and his family? But they can't, Ashton said. Esteban and his sister, both of them were born here. I know, right? Amari said. He looked around the cafeteria. It was loud with the sound of trays banging and kids yelling. Someone blew a whistle, and for a moment, everything went silent. But then a boy at the far end of the cafeteria held up a whistle he had blown, and it was like someone turned on the sound again. I watched a teacher go over to him and take the whistle away. His dad wrote good poetry, Holly said. Writes, I said. He writes good poetry. They're not dead, guys. It just sucks, Amari said. Here we are trying to have the art room, and boom, it gets messed up like this. I mean, Esteban, he's cool. He's nice. He makes us the six of us. It's not fair. Nah, it's not, Holly said. This is supposed to be America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Amari was drinking milk, and he laughed so hard it came spraying out of his mouth and nose all over the table and Holly. So gross, Holly said. Oh my God, you are so gross. She wiped her shirt and hands with a tissue. Milk sprinkled her sandwich, so she pushed her whole tray away. My bad, Amari said, but he was still laughing. Then he stopped and looked at all of us. I got one word for you, Amari said. Lenape. What about them? You think they were somewhere saying, well, this is supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave? Nah, man. They were here in Lenape-Hooking, a.k.a. New York City, getting robbed. They were getting gangstered by the so-called settlers. You missed that whole history lesson? Holly glared at him. No, I didn't miss that whole history lesson, she said, mocking him. Then how are you going to be trying to erase them? You're doing the same thing the people who took E's dad are doing, up here trying to erase people. No, I'm not, Holly yelled. We got quiet. Amari looked around the cafeteria. People were staring at us. One of the 8th graders who had necked Ashton gave us the finger, and Tiago, Amari, and Ashton jumped out of their seats and lurched towards him, but the boy put up his hands in an all's cool way, and they sat back down. Ashton's neck was back to its pale, skinny self. There was something both heartbreaking and awesome about that big boy being scared of some 5th, 6th grade special kids. Come on, guys, Tiago said. Eve will be back. We don't need to be fighting about it. He wouldn't want that. We all agreed. He wouldn't. Chapter 28. On Friday, Esteban was still gone. Amari came into the art room saying, "The great imperfect world continues to spin on a slant." He threw up his hands just like he'd said something amazing. We just looked at him, waiting for him to say something else. But he didn't. He took a seat, looked over at Esteban's empty spot by the window, and took out his markers. Tiago reached for the recorder. We all froze. Even Amari, his drawing pad halfway out of his backpack, the colored markers gathered in their rubber band on his desk. Maybe for a millisecond the world stopped spinning. Maybe Esteban, wherever he was, turned towards the art room and smiled. "Can I record myself today?" Tiago asked. The four of us nodded, our mouths slightly open. He pressed the record button, cracked his left knuckles with his right hand, and started talking. "So now it's almost wintertime, right? And we've been coming here for so long. I feel like I know you guys, and you're sort of all like brothers, my brothers and sisters, and I know I can trust you, right?" We all nodded. "I feel like there's love in this room, and I know that sounds corny, but I feel it." He hits his chest. "Right here. I feel like we care about each other. Even Esteban." Tiago kissed his pointer and middle finger and raised them into the air. "Wherever he is, he's our brother, and he's our friend, and part of him is in this room." We kissed our own fingers and raised them into the air, nodding. "I want to tell you the story of Perito. He was my dog. He was part Doberman, part Labrador. He was the best dog. He was my best friend. He spoke Spanish and English. Sometimes when Miss Laverne asked us to write in class, it's hard for me. The words don't want to come. I see you guys all writing, and I don't want to do that too, but the words I write want to come out in Spanish, not English, and people are always saying, speak English, speak English." Not you guys. I mean, when you see me and Esteban talking in Spanish, you just say, "Teach me." You don't say mean things. Once, when me and my mom were walking down the block speaking in Spanish, this guy yelled at us, "This is America, speak English." But I'm from Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico is part of the United States of America too, so Spanish should be American, right? We all agreed. Amari was drawing, but he kept nodding with the rest of us. Tiago's quiet was beginning to make sense to us. "But me and my mom didn't say anything," Tiago said, "because that guy was big and he looked mad. And if Perito had been with us, I bet that guy wouldn't have said anything. Perito was big too, and the Doberman part of him was mad protective of us. When me and my mom got to the next block, we started talking again, but my mom was whispering, and I was sad that guy with his red, angry face made my mom quieter. The four of you guys," he pointed to me, Ashton, Holly, and Amari, "you guys only speak English, and I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. But dude," Amari said, "Puerto Rico is a part of this country, and you speak English too." "Yeah, I know," Tiago said, "but I only speak in Spanish with my family, and in PR, even though we had to speak English and Spanish in school, I still liked speaking in Spanish better." His voice dropped, and he looked down at his hands. "And because I came from Puerto Rico, I'm safe. I don't have to worry, not for myself and my family, just for my friends." He stared at the voice recorder for a long time. "My mom, when she's at home, she loves to sing in Spanish. She talks in Spanish, she cooks in Spanish. It feels like she's even laughs in Spanish because her smile gets so big. But when she goes outside now, she is very quiet because she's afraid of another person like that guy will look her inside her mouth and see Puerto Rico there. Not the beach or the sparkling blue ocean, not the awesome pastilleros or the canepas, sorry, I'm saying that wrong, that are so sweet you can't stop eating them. She thinks they'll see her small town of Isabela where her dad raised chickens, and on holidays her abuela makes arroz the old way on a fire outside, and everybody begged for the pageja, sorry, I'm saying that wrong too, the crispy rice that stuck to the bottom of the pan. She thinks people here will say, 'Go back to your country,' even though this is her country. And it hurts her. It makes her sad and ashamed because if somebody keeps saying something to you, you start believing it, you know? My mom has the past dreams of Puerto Rico and the future dreams of this place, and this place acts like it doesn't have any future dreams of us. In English, perrito means a little dog. Our dog was just a tiny black puppy when we got him. He could almost fit in my hand. He was so small. Some people couldn't say his name right because you have to kind of roll your tongue to say the name of the two R's together. Not everybody can do that. We all tried to do it, to say perrito, like Tiago said. Only Amari could say it right, though. I wanted to give him a name not everybody could say, Tiago told us. I wanted to make him even more special than he already was. I could whisper it, and he would come running. His hearing was good, crazy good. When people called his name in English without doing the right thing with the R's, he wouldn't even lift his head. When he was dying last year, I put his head in my lap and I just kept petting him. I said his name real soft over and over and over, Perito, Perito, Perito. I wasn't scared. He just kept looking more and more peaceful. And then his breath kept getting faster and faster, like maybe in his mind he was somewhere winning a race. And then his breathing stopped and his eyes closed. I put my face against his head and I said, "You won, Perito. You won the race." My mom just let me stay like that for that long time, just me and Perito's body and the quiet. Tiago stopped talking. He had tears in his eyes, but he wasn't crying, not really. And then the tears went spilling over. We didn't look at him. It felt like it would be wrong to stare or say anything. He was in his own world. He was back with Perito, his face on Perito. Ahead of them both, the finish line. "I know in my heart," Tiago whispered, "the language we like to speak is music and poetry and even cold, sweet paraguas on hot, hot summer days. But it feels like this place wants to break my heart. It feels like every day it tries to make my mom feel tinier and tinier, like the size of Perito's head in my hands." Chapter 29. The next week, just as we were getting ready to do math problems, Esteban walked back into our classroom. Miss Laverne didn't even try to keep us from jumping out of our seats to hug him and slap his back and say, "Where were you? And we were so scared you had left forever. And is your dad home?" "He's still gone. In Florida," Esteban said when we'd finally calmed down. "But he sent me another poem." Amari had his arm over Esteban's shoulders and Tiago was standing as close to him as he could. The rest of us had gone back to our seats, but we were all staring at E in wonder. It felt magical to have him back. It felt like we were almost perfect again. Miss Laverne asked him to come up to the front of the class to read the poem to us, and when Amari finally let go of him, he carefully removed a piece of yellow paper from between his notebook pages. His uniform was clean but wrinkled, and the dark circles under his eyes looked like they covered most of his face now. He looked skinnier too. "We moved to live with my aunt in Queens," he said, "and one of my crazy baby cousins tried to eat this." He held up the poem. The edge had a tiny bite taken out of it. Esteban shook his head, but he was smiling. "I'm going to read it in Spanish first," Esteban said. He read, and even though I didn't understand the words, they were so beautiful they sounded like music, and I put my head down on my desk to listen better. "Now I'm going to read the English translation that I made for you." He looked at the five of us, then at Miss Laverne. He seemed older somehow, like he had gone away and lived in a whole life and then came back to us. "And in the night when the dog barks at shadows, tell him not to be afraid of what he cannot see or the things he does not yet understand. There is mystery everywhere. Beneath rocks, there is damp earth and an army of ants planning a revolution." Esteban stood at the front of the room, staring at the page. Then he lifted his head and looked at us. We cheered again, even louder this time. I don't know if any of us really understood his dad's poem, but for a long time after he'd finished reading, I thought about that army of ants, how they were coming together, like us. Chapter 30. "And in the end, when the dog barks at shadows, tell him not to be afraid." In the cafeteria that day, Esteban asked if he could record the poems he had read to us. "I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow," he said, "or the next day or the day after that." "But I thought you were back, son," Amari said. Esteban looked down at his empty tray. He had eaten everything on it so fast. Amari handed over his milk and I gave him my leftover beef taco. "We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, he told us later when we got to the art room. They might be trying to deport my mommy too, and that's why we moved to my aunt's house. It's like my mommy had to hide now." "But why?" Ashton asked. Esteban shrugged. "She's from the DR too. My aunt, she was born here, and my husband is from America. My mommy said, and her husband is from America. My mommy said if she gets sent back, me and my sister can stay with my aunt, but I don't want that." He climbed up to his place by the window, but he didn't get quiet and stare out. He turned towards us and crossed his legs. When he did, I saw the holes in the bottoms of his shoes. His socks, which were probably bright white when they were new, were grayish and barely covered his ankles. His uniform pants were too short now. I turned on the recorder and put it on my desk. Esteban nodded, repeated what he had just said, and continued. "They took my puppy. They came to his job when he was leaving, and they said he didn't belong in this country. Maybe always in his heart he knew the day was coming. When I was little, he used to always say to me, 'Every day is a blessing from God, Esteban. Even if it rains or gets so cold you can see your breath and think your own bones are going to break beneath your skin, this too is God's blessing,' my puppy said. 'One day your days are all gone, and then that's when you have nothing.' I was probably a stupid little kid whining because I wanted a toy or ice cream. I don't even remember, but Now I know something. I know we had everything we needed. We had food every day, and coats, and boots, and warm socks, and water. Before, you used to hear the word immigration, and it sounded like everything you ever believed in. It sounded like Feliz Cumpleaños, and Merry Christmas, and Welcome Home. But now you hear it and you get scared because it sounds like a word that makes you want to disappear. It sounds like someone got stolen away from you. What's going to happen, E? Amari asked. Esteban shrugged. My mommy says you have to pay for lawyers and stuff to fight it, but we don't have money for that. I think we're all going to have to go back to the DR. And that would suck because I would miss New York and I would miss all of you guys. We sat there, silent, all of us looking at Esteban. It felt like he was already gone, and we were trying hard to remember him.